Okay, so what if I told you that a 100-year-old book of fables set in ancient Babylon has better financial advice than 90% of what's currently in print and available today? Well, stick around for this book review of The Richest Man in Babylon to find out if A, I'm right or not, and B, whether this book is worth spending your precious time reading.
So where the heck is Babylon?
Babylon is like ancient Iraq,
Ah, okay.
Mesopotamia. Yeah,
Mesopotamia. I've heard of that one. Um,
yeah.
it's like the cradle of civilization.
It it is, and it's the place with the first written language, first people to have a currency, I think, and money, and also just something that disappeared back into the desert into dust. And yeah, it's just nothing at all now.
Wow, man, crazy.
Yeah, quite interesting. So yeah, okay. Welcome back to Signal Over Noise. This episode, another book review and another one about money. Why? Well, you need to be at least somewhat good at money and not to spend every waking moment consumed by it or by the fear of its absence. And it's basically not taught formally to any of us. And if you can get your house in order financially, then we're free to pursue other things of equal or greater importance and ensure we do not become a burden to others. So, as mentioned, we'll be reviewing The Richest Man in Babylon through the lens of what we can learn to better sort out our own finances, such that we can liberate ourselves from the anxieties of not having enough money and not meeting our own needs and wants and those of our family. So, you ready for this, Samuel?
Hell yeah, let's do this.
Great. So first, let's set the scene of what is this book? Well, it was published back in 1926, and it's a sort of non-fiction personal finance self-help book that teaches a set of practical personal finance advice principles through the fictional setting of a series of conversations between wealthy individuals and broke ones in Babylon, which, like you've asked, was this society that was sort of cradle of a lot of modernity and civilization in what we now call Iraq 4,000 years ago. In the book, the author uses conversations between the wealthy and the not wealthy as parables to teach us, the reader, and the poor Babylonians who don't yet possess that financial wisdom, how they can accrue greater wealth and avoid the stress and anxieties of not having any money. So that's great. It does it by sort of attempting to make personal finances interesting and engaging by showing us financial management and mismanagement through the medium of story. And it's obviously done this pretty well, as it's surely the only personal finance book still in print 100 years on. And the author, George S. Clason, has gone on to sell 2 million copies of something that is said to have just taken the form of him knitting together pamphlets issued by American banks between 1920 and 1924 and putting them into story. So, he's created something pretty impressive through his artistic endeavors and his creativity. But yeah, this is all about seeing what's behind the hype and what we can learn from it. And I would just note that actually, if you're expecting a really riveting story, the storytelling is a little bit limited in that often it just focuses on little bits of sort of preamble to shift us from one conversational setting to another. So it'll be they're at dinner and they're teaching a life lesson, and then they're in the hall where speaking gets done and they're speaking about life lessons. So, there are better storybooks out there. But anyway, are there better storybook personal finance hybrids out there? Perhaps not. So anyway, overall, it is a lot more engaging and a lot less dry than a lot of books in this space. So I definitely recommend it to someone who wants to improve their relationship with money without boring themselves senseless, as at least a good place to start. Obviously, the world of personal finance back in 1926 and even further back in ancient Babylon was less complex than it is today, which I think is part of why it's aged so well. There were a lot fewer spending, savings, investment options available. So the book's not teaching us specific advice nuggets about what investment vehicles to use or explaining your pension savings pots and tax regimes or something like that. Rather, it's teaching us themes and principles of finance And it does that first with what the author describes as his 7 cures to a lean purse. And then he goes on to reiterate his sort of favorite 5 of them with what he describes as the 5 laws of gold. And then there are a few other sort of interspersed life lessons that he wants to teach us. And we'll cover off on the 7 cures of the lean purse, and then the sort of select few other ones that I thought were most interesting and most useful. And then we'll wrap it up with our key takeaways. Right, those 7 cures to a lean purse are as follows. 1. Start thy purse fattening. To do this, the author advises that we pay ourselves first by taking 10% of our income from our work or our labours and putting it straight into a savings pot. He argues that this is easier to stick to if we do it at the very beginning when we get paid, rather than later on after we've already spent up 90% of it. And he invites us to do this so that we can celebrate the act of growing our wealth. I guess modern sort of psychologists and stuff would talk about the dopamine and stuff associated with making a purchase and the excitement around it and the anticipation. So if we build excitement and anticipation about getting to pay into our savings pot instead, that's pretty good, because we do have a problem of discounting the future and potential rewards in the future for certain rewards in the present. So if we reward ourselves each time we get a paycheck by sort of celebrating the ritual of moving 10% of that over into some sort of long-term savings product for us, then I think that's really bloody sound advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, similar thing for me when I'm trying to put my money away. Like, it's quite nice actually it'll take like 6 or 7 months, but by the time you start going into there, you'll start saying, oh, actually, I'm starting to put some like actual good money away here, which is almost like that dopamine hit. It's like, oh, I haven't been doing this for nothing. I haven't got like $100 in here. I've got like it's growing. So yeah, I don't know, that I do actually get a dopamine rush from that part of it. So you have to stick with it for a few months first. But yeah, I really like that idea. Easy and done. Have you got any suggestions for how you could do that?
Make it visible. You know how I guess you get these sort of like gamification of purchasing through like apps like Temu or whatever, like figure out a way that you can gamify saving for your own future, I reckon. Just copy whatever psychological traps are being used to make you spend money, mimic them as best you can to make you save money.
Do you know what? That's actually really, you could do that with a spreadsheet, couldn't you? You could just say, okay, at the current kind of like projections for interest rates, if you continue to do this, then this is how much you'd have in 20 years or whatever.
Yeah. We could talk about, like you were saying with a savings pot, like whether what you're saving that thing for, reminding yourself the incrementally getting closer is good.
What's New Zealand, mate?
Pardon? Closer to New Zealand. Yeah, so I just got a flight. Well, yeah, I'm very close. Sat here in Dunedin. I got a flight down from Wellington to Dunedin today, and I was sat next to somebody who him and his mates have all been saving into a pot to go on an All Blacks tour of some kind. And the All Blacks and the Springboks, so New Zealand and South Africa rugby, have both announced that they're going to start doing alternate long tours, a little bit like the Lions do once every 4 years. So next year, the All Blacks go to South Africa on the tour. And he was saying, well, actually, like, you know, it is an exorbitant amount of money, but we've been saving towards a rugby tour for a long time. Now this opportunity's come up and we have some money that's already pre-allocated to that. And so we'll probably be able to do it. And it'll probably be once in a lifetime bucket list stuff that's awesome. And we'll get to do it. So anyway, that's pretty cool. On to number 2, the second cure for a lean purse: control thy expenditures. So here I'll introduce to you the main sort of star turn of the book. He's a fictional wealthy dude in Babylon called Arcad. So he's the richest man in all of Babylon. And it starts with all these other characters being quite jealous and envious, and they can't understand the sort of the mystique or the magic of how he has more money than them. and he just spells it out for them. And control thy expenditures. When they're talking about that, he's warning his young understudy about confusing necessities or needs with luxuries or wants. And he says what each of us calls our necessary expenses will always grow to equal our incomes unless we protest to the contrary. And, quote, confuse the necessary expenses with thy desires, end quote. And so we probably know this by the more modern terminology, lifestyle creep. And it's the primary reason that we can all find someone who makes 3 times as much money as us, but feels just as poor, if not more so. Number 3 is make thy gold multiply. So this is what you were talking about with these long-term investments getting more attractive the more you sort of plugging away. Quote, the earnings it will make shall build our fortunes. Learn to make your treasure work for you. Make it your slave. Make its children and its children's children work for you. And so that's basically about, once you have some savings, you need to figure out how to make them work and make you some money. The book was written in 1926. And so at the time, the US dollar was still pegged to gold. It was essentially a promissory note that you could get a certain amount of gold for your dollars. So they couldn't just money print out of thin air in the way that basically all governments can now do. So this book was written before the era of quantitative easing and inflation. So it doesn't cover that. But this point is more important now, even than it used to be. Gold sort of stashed underneath the bed doesn't do anything for you. You can't put it or the money it's made you to work. And nowadays, gold stashed underneath the bed or money, which is no longer associated and attached to gold in a linear way, it just melts in value the longer you hold on to it, because more and more money is just basically being conjured out of thin air to meet the spending obligations of Western governments, including yours and mine. Anyway, so that's number 3. Figure out a way of making your earnings work for you. And number 4 is guard thy treasures from loss. Here, the same wealthy dude, Arcad, cautions against risky investments and extols the values of relevant expertise with a fable about trusting some tradesman to go and buy fancy gems, and basically I'm getting really ripped off and buying duds. So in the modern world, if you're investing in property, don't ask a baker. If you're setting up a bakery, don't ask your real estate agent. They say, quote, study carefully before parting with thy treasure, each assurance that it may be safely reclaimed. Be not misled by thine own romantic desires to make wealth rapidly. That's number 4. And number 5 is make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. Here's one that's not really news to anyone, but is a lot easier to say than do. If you can afford to, it's usually financially worthwhile to own your own home if you can, but that was in 1926 world. So yes, this one's sort of unachievable even for those that think it makes sense, and there may be some more question marks about whether it does make sense. Now, 6, ensure a future income. So consider how long you'll be physically and mentally be capable of doing what you currently do to earn money. How many years have you got left in the tank? How long will you want to do it for? And how will you substitute your income when you no longer want or are able to do it? Number 7, increase thy ability to earn. Invest in employable skills and knowledge. Quote, that man who seeks to learn more of his craft shall be richly rewarded. End quotes. Then we have his 5 laws of gold. They're basically all restatements of 5 of the 7 of the above, so we'll sort of skip off on that. But I do think that reiterating good points is a good way of making them stick. I think maybe religious groups are pretty good on that. I think schools and other authorities maybe teach you a valuable lesson once, but Sunday school teaches you it every week. Maybe not every week, but they're pretty happy to go over the important salient points again and again. And I think it's okay that a book that's helping educate you in something important does that. But for purposes of brevity, we won't go over the 5 laws of gold today, but we will instead run through what I thought were the good takeaways from the other chapters. Chapter 4 was, can you attract good luck? And the author's lessons espoused through this Arcad character were that gamekeepers always stack games in their own favor. So don't gamble in games stacked against you and expect to win. And sort of conversely, somebody who passes up opportunities will certainly not benefit from them. So not all games are stacked against you, and some opportunities are time limited, and choosing to wait to see how it plays out has an opportunity cost to it as well. Chapter 6 is a cautionary tale about someone lending gold. Loans to those with capital will likely be repaid. Loans to those with the means to earn may be repaid. Loans to those who have neither capital nor the ability to earn will not be repaid. Those in the throes of emotions are bad bets. Those that borrow with a plan to make money are more likely to repay the loan than those that are borrowing to cover previous losses already made. Another point he makes, youth may, in overambition, aiming for fast riches, often overborrow without sound investment strategies or plans. And then he, I guess, is extolling the virtues of diversification. Once you're already wealthy, he says, do not aim for idle gold or lending with risk. Lend cautiously and into many places. If, when you have money, many temptations will arise to spend it, much unsolicited advice will be offered on how to invest it. Growing it safely and reliably is the aim and the skill. Chapter 7, The Walls of Babylon. So this is a story about withstanding the unexpected. In this instance, it's a foreign army marching their forces up to the walls of Babylon. Unexpected things can and do happen. Really important things are worth protecting in these instances.
How do I do it? How do I protect my pile of gold?
The short answer would be insurance. Have some other thing that pays out if that particular pile melts or is stolen from you. So that could be formal insurance in the modern world, or diversification, or a direct hedge against a particular bet if you don't think it's good. But I also think, what he's talking about is don't take undue or unnecessary risks with your pile of gold.
Yeah, I hear you. I like those 3 different rules about who's likely to pay you back or not. Person with no capital or means to make capital will not pay you back, and is borrowing to cover previous losses. Yeah, that's really good.
It is, because it's not personal. It just looks at like the sort of bare bones, like kind of maths or physics behind the equation of lending that money. It can be someone you think is delightfully charismatic or is a great friend to you, but if they've got a proven track record of getting themselves into debt and not being able to get themselves out, and no tried, tested, or even plausible route of making some money, if you're thinking about lending them money, then actually what you're really thinking about is giving them money and then hoping and wishing upon a star that they might give you some back in return.
How would somebody who has not got a track record be able to borrow money?
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Why is there an obligation on someone to give money away? Someone who's got no track record or proof that they're good with money? Because it's essentially what you're asking for. If you're saying, I have no accumulated evidence that I know what I'm doing, I would like your money, please.
It's like a chicken and egg situation, right? I did like the phrases, like you kind of tied it in a little bit there to young people and like over ambition, and how that might be like an unlock. Could be like, okay, going like perhaps this person doesn't have a track record, but they're young, they've got like crazy ambition, they're going to work hard. Maybe they have another resource to trade, which is not capital, which is time. And maybe, if you could see them actually making progress towards a certain goal, then perhaps that's a nice kind of lever to pull as a point of proving, okay, I maybe don't have a track record with earning money, but maybe I have a track record of doing interesting things and meaningful things. And I don't know. It's hard though. I guess in reality, we're approaching this from a personal finance perspective, as opposed to almost like a Dragon's Den type situation, or Shark Tank, or whatever the Kiwi version is of those 2 shows. What do you have over there? Any idea?
There isn't one. There's an Australian Shark Tank, which is even got one of the American Shark Tankers on, but there isn't one here. But I would say, given that we're sort of talking about it on a personal finance level, you can, if you don't have any money and you have lots of ideas and ambition and stuff, then like you either need something that's going to generate an income fast, that's going to start paying for itself, or you need to do an audit of like, do you have wealthy backers who are willing to give money not for the sake of money and make a poor financial bet because they like you or they're related to you or whatever, because they're willing to. Or you need to say like, what are the really long levers of things that I can pull cheaply that maximize on, like you say, those other assets that I do have. So ambition, time, education, whatever it is, despite having very limited amounts of capital to deploy. Anyway,
Amen.
so chapter 8 was a story of Arkad's early days and becoming a slave. And it's a story not about literal slavery, hopefully, although in a different book that I'm reading at the moment that I'll talk about in another episode, Factfulness, I came across a pretty shocking stat about how many of the 194 countries in the world in the year 1800 either had legalized slavery or their government was actively engaged in slavery. So I'm going to ask you to guess that, Sam. Out of 194 countries, 1800, 225 years ago, slavery is legal.
I'm going to say 50. No, that's too much. 40%.
It was 193 out of 194, 99.5%.
Oh my days. Sorry, I gave you a percentage there. But yeah, geez. Okay. So I went 50%, I went half, less than half.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. That's
So
horrific. That's
anyway,
almost all countries. Yeah, it'd be easier to
yeah.
name the ones that did not engage in
Well, there was
slavery.
one that did not, and I don't know what it is. So anyway, this one's about figuratively becoming a slave to yourself or to your debts and viewing debts as enemies, because your debtors may start out as your friends and perhaps they've seen promise in you and trusted you to make good on it. But if you spend too long in their debt and fail to repay, they will no longer be your friends. And the debt itself, that money you owe, is basically a form of servitude that your future self will need to pay. Or you will fail to repay those debts and end up facing severe repercussions for this, which, depending on the form of the debts that you've taken on, could be social, could be legal, could be the repossession of other stuff that you'd rather keep. So yeah, I think it's a really good point, basically, that like there's a lot of risk associated with taking on debt. So you've got to have a really compelling reason why. And it's never been easier to take on debt with all these like buy now, pay laters and anyone getting approved for credit cards. And yeah, I guess like there's a whole market of people making good money, putting other people on debt. So not
Is it,
good money.
I don't know if I feel like really old here, but I'm sure every purchase I buy online now has a Klarna link next to it or one of those types of things. And I'm talking like buying like, I don't know, £25 t-shirt or something. I don't know if I'm just old or it's just become more prevalent now. It's pretty crazy. And I have looked at them sometimes and like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to spread this. And like I just bought, it's not particularly expensive, but a tablet. And I was like, oh, I could, rather than putting down 200 quid now, I could maybe put down £35 a month over 6 months or whatever it is. But ultimately, there's going to be interest to pay on that. So you'd better just put down the money now. I get you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can really overextend yourself really quickly on that sort of stuff because each individual purchase, you could sort of say, oh, it's just 25 quid or whatever. But like you say, if you're doing it for literally everything, because the option is there and it's a single click, just, well, you can build a mountain that you're going to have to summit at some point. Yeah. Or poop or scoop your way through that mountain of financially accumulated shit. Anyway.
That's what Labour's doing.
Yes. Anyway, we're not going to go there yet. Maybe next week. We'll see what we see. Another good point in chapter 10, the man who has coins in his purse that he need not spend is good to his family and his king. The man who hath but a few coppers is indifferent to his family and king. But the man who has naught in his purse is unkind to his family and disloyal to his king. Here, the author is essentially arguing that poverty or scarcity can drive us to distraction and occasionally dishonorable behaviors, and that being a good spouse, parent, citizen, all that sort of stuff is easier when you're not financially distressed and distracted.
That's it. You've got a bit of time to give back to your community and keep up with obligations, not just financial obligations. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think about maybe the difference in wealth of people of our generation and people of the generation above, and I think there's probably a correlation of that, of like one good 40 hours a week income was usually a good enough quality of life for you, your partner, and your children. Whereas nowadays, people are struggling to get by on 50, 60 hours of gig economy ad hoc work, and therefore don't have what they feel is an adequate amount of time and energy reserves to, I don't know, volunteer at the local scout hut and stuff. And I think there are confounding issues and changes that are also co-occurred with that. But I do think it's basically, this is not to denigrate people who are impoverished and say that, that is in any way correlates with character. But like, if we are what we repeatedly do, it's easier to repeatedly do good things that those around us benefit from if we're not, fully occupied by money or its scarcity. Anyway, so yeah, if we were to sort of wrap it up, basically what the author George S. Clason is suggesting we do is we take 1/10 of our money as soon as we get it and we pay it to ourselves. Like, that's to keep. That's not to fritter away on monthly purchases and things like that. And then we're going to have sort of 7/10 for us to provide home, food, spending on enjoyment, and we should try and never exceed that amount. And then perhaps 2/10 covering your debts. Now, obviously, if you're going to buy a house in the modern age, those tenths might be different. But if you've paid your 1/10 to yourself first, then you might be able to make it all add up. If instead you try and hope that you'll still have 1/10 left after covering off on, house, food, entertainment, and debts, then you'll probably repeatedly find that you don't have anything. And one good point actually in the very last chapter is about the history of Babylon itself. So it possessed some fertile land and some drinkable water, but everything else there was human ingenuity and cooperation. The sort of fall of Babylon after being invaded and basically ceasing to exist and being wiped from the map 3,000 years ago is sort of testament to this fact. It was the social and cultural institutions that made it what it is. Writing, language, counting, currency, all pretty radical inventions at the time. Once they went away, Babylon went away and ceased to matter and ceased to be a place where people wanted to live. So yeah, a couple of other points that I really liked. Old tongues love to wag. Wisdom is valuable. So just ask people that are better than you are at something you want to get good at. Just ask them about it. And a related point is that we get good at what we set ourselves to. And if we want to be wealthy, we should want to get good at generating and sustaining incomes that exceed our outgoings. And so, yeah, we might be able to, if we follow these rules, do that, and that would be good.
I love that image. Old tongues love to wag. That's cool. And it's true. I mean, it's a silly sounding kind of image, right? But it's so true. What's his name? Steve Jobs. In his biography, and I heard it quoted a few times, it was like he basically, when he was a child, he reached out to Hewlett Packard or Hewlett or Packard. I think that's two different people, and said, "Oh, hey, I'm building this this particular counter. I'd love to have this particular component, please." And bear in mind, these people are the co-founders of what, $1 billion company. One of them, Mr. Hewlett, said, "Actually, yeah, you can have these components, but also would you like to have a summer internship?" So he came in, it's like, I don't know if it was 12, 13, 14-year-old kid in to do a summer internship at HP. But, I no doubt this guy just wanted to help him out. He saw a kid who was shooting a shot and he was more than happy to help out. And that's obviously on like the more kind of startup technology side of things, but I'm sure it's exactly the same thing if you were to speak to somebody who you know well and respect well about their wealth and how they built it, the kind of rules that they follow, because no doubt they would have their own framework. Not everyone's read The Richest Man of Babylon, but thanks to Owen, you don't have to. So yeah, on that note, any damn fool can make something complicated, Master Owen. Make it simple for me with your 3 takeaways
Absolutely.
and big ideas.
Yeah, right. 1, pay yourself first. We've just spoken about hyping yourself up for this, for taking something that you've earned, you've worked hard for it, and putting it into something you're keeping hold of. So celebrate savings as frequent small wins that buy you future security and opportunity. The best time to divert it is before the temptation of spending it arises. And it will be easier to avoid lifestyle creep if you basically move that money into something and celebrate that rather than having it all sat in one pot from which you then need to employ your own willpower to make sure there's still 10% of it left at the end of the month. Point number 2 is that idle money does nothing for you. I mean, as I mentioned, so the book was written back when the US dollar was still tied to gold, and there was some relationship that was unbreakable. So idle money under the mattress was just sat there, and it wasn't doing anything positive, and it wasn't doing anything negative until the president signed a law mandating everyone give their gold to the government, when obviously then the value of gold under your bed suddenly changed, and they changed it by force overnight and made it all worth a lot less. And yeah, it was illegal with a pretty big sentence if you held your gold and didn't give it to the government. But anyway, so that idle money is now that governments can print billions and billions and billions every year to cover spending expenses they are unable to meet through taxation. It's not just not doing anything, it's melting or going down in purchasing power. So make cautious, well-researched investments with it. And just as debt can multiply with compound interest, so too can wealth. So repeated good financial habits and savings can transform into long-term success. And number 3 is going to be, and this is sort of a theme that we didn't really cover off on that much, but does come up in the book, is remember that the place of money is not that it's an end, it's a trusted medium of exchange that can secure the safety, warmth, needs, and ability to dictate and determine what you do with your time to allow you to spend it doing meaningful things with those you love or for those you would like to do meaningful things for. So having a decent handle on money better allows you to deliver on these things and whatever else is most important to you.
So effectively what? Money is not the ends. Money is a mean to the ends, i.e. money will let you live a fulfilled life doing things you love with people you love for people you love. Is that a fair reflection?
Yeah, it is, because I think anyone with any amount of money, if more money is their ends, is always going to feel inferior to an imagined version of themselves that has more money. And because it's so easy to count and collect and keep score of, you'll always be able to find in this connected age somebody with more of it and make yourself feel small if that's the main scorecard that you're handing in, and that's the source of value and meaning in your life. So I think it's about keeping it in context, and it is even, when they're talking about what to do with your tenths, entertainment and living basically, and not being too much of a miser is an important point that actually gets more tenths than the investing in yourself. Sorry, not investing in yourself, saving money.
That's a really good point. Yeah, sorry, I was thinking about the end goal there, but you're right. As you go along, those 2/10 rather than 1/10 are for living. Yeah, just a final tidbit. I be reading what's called Never Enough, which is by someone called Andrew Wilson, who's a Canadian entrepreneur, and he does value investing. It kind of seems like the internet version of who are they? Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and basically he talks about, like, on paper at least, hitting the big B, $1 billion. And he said, I didn't know what to do. And he said he basically, like, went around and met lots of very wealthy people. And he said they were all sad. He said they were all comparing themselves to the next wealthiest person. So their primary goal was to make more money. He just said they were all sad. None of them had happy lives because none of them were content. None of them had enough. That's the name of the book. But that in mind, that be a cautionary tale that money is not the end game. Although allowing yourself to live a happy life is. So money will certainly help. Okay.
Sweet ass.
Do I do it? Do you want to do it? We need to do it.
You go for it. You do it.
Man, I can't take it from you. You've done the work. God, you got it.
Righto. Thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode. We look forward to seeing you next time. Till then, be well and do good.
Whoa! Nice.